Good morning, and thank you for attending another webinar in our New Mexico Recovery Series. The focus of our series is economic recovery and resources available to help you grow. My name is Jennifer Myers. I'm the statewide disaster recovery coordinator. We're recording this session and we'll be sending out a link to the recording as well as a copy of all the presentations that you'll see today to everybody that's registered. So feel free to submit your questions to the question box. Throughout the presentation, we'll have some time at the end, but we may stop within the presentation to address those. So let's go ahead and get started. So if you've attended any of my webinars, I always highlight the 7 disaster recovery coordinators. Each region has a regional disaster recovery coordinator and are available to assist businesses, local government, and communities. If you'd like to reach out to your coordinator, their contact information is listed on the slide that's provided. I want to just take a couple minutes to highlight a couple of upcoming events. New Mexico funded program assists communities in accessing financing from over 15 different state and federal entities, all in one virtual meeting. Funded is not a grant program, it's a platform for connecting your community with a variety of different agencies and resources simultaneously. This collaboration saves time, improves effective project review and support, and ensures strategic investment with public resources. I have included a list of eligible projects. Just can I give you an example of what kind of projects are submitted. To learn more how to apply for funded or click on the website that's listed on there. The application deadline is due November 29th and the funded meeting is December 14th. The governor has unveiled the new 20-year strategic plan and will guide economic investment in New Mexico. I was able to attend an event where Secretary Keyes and Deputy Secretary Clark did an amazing job presenting a high-level overview of the plan, addressing questions and comments. It was about an hour and a half, so I will try to do it in about a minute. New Mexico needs a comprehensive approach to economic development, which looks at short-term recovery, long-term planning, and economic diversification. The Economic Development Department has worked alongside numerous stakeholders, including state agencies, regional and local governments, along with many other organizations and industry leaders to create a strategic plan and identify steps to economic growth. So what do you need to know? The plan can be downloaded directly off of our website. You can click on the link provided and you have 2 options. You can download the summary or the full 406-page plan. So those are your options. If you're reading through it and you have input or want to send us any comments, any feedback at all, just send an email to eddstateplan@state.nm.us. And we want to make sure this is a living document. We don't want it to sit on a shelf, so we really are encouraging any public comment on the plan. Now, if you'd like to learn more, we are also hosting another webinar on November 22nd at 11 a.m. So just click on the link to register for that webinar. So what group will be in charge of managing, updating, and executing the strategic plan? The Sustainable Economy Task Force and Council. The task force was created based on Cabinet Secretary designation from 12 agencies, and advisory council was chosen by Indian Affairs Department and the Economic Development Department. If you'd like to attend the very first meeting of the task force and council, just click on the links provided. There's an opportunity at the very end of the meeting to have some public input. How do you stay up to date on all of these programs and webinars I mentioned? Just sign up for our wrap-up. We list all our events and any resources that can help your business grow. It's the best way to just stay connected with our department. So with that, I'm going to transition over to the New Mexico Finance Authority team to discuss the Business Recovery Grant Program. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and make Adam the presenter.
And I'm going to do my best to catch that pass with some level of ease. Can you all see my screen?
Yes, Adam.
Okay, great. So good morning, everybody. Thanks for attending our presentation today. My name's Adam Johnson. I'm Chief of Program Operations for the New Mexico Finance Authority. Also with us today is Maria Gallardo and Lynn Talby. Maria is the Managing Director of our recovery programs, and Lynn is our Communications and Outreach Managing Director. We are going to cover the program both from a high level and the nitty gritty down to how the actual application process works. And I do have a request. I'm going to consider this, even though we've got 136 attendees, I'm going to consider this a little bit of a fireside chat. So feel free to ask your questions as we go through the presentation. We will try to pick them up and answer them as it makes sense. And I also just have a little favor so we can be a little dynamic with what we talk about. If folks wouldn't mind just throwing into the chat what their title is or what their position is, or simply if they're a business owner, if they're a bookkeeper, just so we could try to hone in and make sure that we're providing the most accurate information for the group. Let's see here. So, as I mentioned, Chief of Programs and Managing Director of Recovery Programs, we're going to take the group through this this grant program. So this grant program was created to give awards for New Mexico businesses of up to $100,000. The application deadline for the last round is December 7th next month, so it's coming up pretty quickly. We've already been able to serve nearly 1,000 New Mexico businesses with this fund, and over the course of that time period, the average award has been right around $50,000. So it's a good sized grant award. It's definitely, we're hoping today to help folks understand that it is worth your time to come through the application process. The law that created this program does require that should we have enough demand to exceed the amount of funds available, that we will prioritize based upon the greatest revenue decline that occurred between 2019 and 2020. We're going to talk about how we calculate that today. And then in the event that we need to use that prioritization statistic, we're going to do that after December 7th on the remaining applications. So one of the points that I want to make sure I get across very quickly for folks, so that because I'm mindful that everybody's time is precious, is that the first qualification standard for this program is that you must have employees that are reported to the Department of Workforce Solutions. The number of employees must be 1 or no more than 74. The 75th, the businesses with 75 and more employees do not qualify for this program. Folks that are self-employed that do not report to the Department of Workforce Solutions, this grant program is also not eligible for those types of businesses. The next requirement for the program is that your business either reduce staff or reduced hours. I want to make sure that we emphasize the reduction of hours and not just staff, because many folks benefited from various other types of financial support. Benefited is maybe a little generous. They did the best that they could with the financial support that was given in programs like the PPP, and therefore, because the requirements of a program like that actually kept their staff on, but it's still the case that you may have had to reduce hours with that limited resource. And so I want to make sure that folks understand that it could very much well be a reduction of staff hours versus a reduction of actual bodies. You must have experienced a decline between 2019 and 2020. And this grant is specifically for the reimbursement of rent, lease, or mortgage expenses. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. The business does have to operate in New Mexico, but it doesn't actually have to be owned by New Mexicans. It just has to operate in New Mexico. And then lastly, the law requires that the wages are reported to the Department of Workforce Solutions. Before I go any further, because what's kind of happened with this program, because as you can see on the screen, there's so many moving parts to this. You're wondering maybe, well, what's the relationship between my mortgage and my rent or lease and my staff? Why did you create this program to have those things together? Well, the answer is at the time, I think firstly, the design of the program probably didn't anticipate that the light switch of the economy would be flipped back on, and we would be in a position of having a rather robust economy at the moment. And at the time, there were lots of programs designed to help individuals with their mortgage, rent, or lease for their homes, but there wasn't much to help folks with the mortgage, rent, and lease for their businesses. So that was specifically targeted for this. And then you may ask, well, why all this information about my employees? Well, the governing statute of this program is the Local Economic Development Act, which does require, in order to receive grant funding to a business in the state of New Mexico, you have to produce employment. And so that's the reason for the connection there. And I hope that mildly simple explanation will remain top of mind as you see sort of the details that are required to get through this program. So how are the grants calculated? And Maria or Lynn, stop me at any time if questions start to pop up that I can help with. So essentially what we do is we request information to calculate the full-time equivalent number of employees at April 1st of 2021. And the awards are based upon the revenue loss from 19 and 20 and the average wages. And I'll show you the calculation in just a minute. As I mentioned, they can be used for rent, lease, or mortgage reimbursements. And one nice thing about this program is the very first 25% of the award goes out at time of closing, so you don't actually have to request and give the documentation for the first award. It's just for the first disbursement. It's just for the subsequent disbursements that occur after your award has closed. So the concept of FTE was very much baked into this program rather than actual human bodies. It looks at the number of hours that a business may provide for its employees, and I think that that's important because that provides a lot of flexibility. It's not about a body count; it's about the number of hours. And so, as you can see here, an FTE is defined in the Economic Development Department as the equivalent is 40 hours per week. And so clearly one employee working 40 hours a week is an FTE, two working 20 is an FTE, and so on and so forth. However many number of hours divided by 40 is the equivalency of the full-time equivalency of the employees. When we look at the full calculation for the award, what we're essentially doing is following this sliding scale that says if your percentage revenue decline from 19 to 20 fits in one of these tiers, this is going to be your base amount of the award per FTE. The program also provides for that if you are paying these staff members more than $13 per hour, then you get an additional $1,000 per FTE. And if you pay them more than $17 per hour, you get an additional $2,000 per FTE. And so again, the total grant amount is the base grant plus the wage bonus times the number of FTEs. And we're gonna look at the FTE calculation in just a moment here. So here's one example. We have a cafe who experienced a 50% revenue decline from 19 to 20. They employ 4 new employees, or plan to employ, I should say, 4 new employees at 20 hours a week. That's the equivalent of 2 FTEs at $15 per hour. And then they have 2 existing employees that will go up, that work between from 20 to 40, creating another additional FTE. So we have 3 total FTEs. The base on the 50% decline, you can see on the scale, was 14,000. And so it's 14,000. The average wage is greater than 17. And so they get the $2,000 bonus, or as we refer to in-house as the kicker, times 3 is a grant of $48,000 for this cafe. The application process itself, we use a very robust system known as Salesforce to house the secure application. This is where you come and provide your information about your business and the authorized officer of the business. You'll come to our website. It will take you to the place where you will create your username and password for your New Mexico Finance Authority Salesforce account. You'll then have access to the application, and I'll show you this in a few minutes. One of the things that we highly recommend is that you gather your documentation in advance of starting the application. Some of the requirements in order to stay compliant in various ways are various types of tax documents. Obviously, we need the reports for the Department of Workforce Solutions, and gathering that information tends to be some of the more extraneous part of this process. If you have a relationship with an accountant or a bookkeeper, I highly recommend getting their assistance. We did a nice webinar for the CPA Society yesterday. Accountants and bookkeepers all over the state are hopefully becoming more and more aware of this program, and I think can help make the process much easier. We know, and in my past experience being in the private sector for quite some time, that we often are more focused on actually delivering on our services or goods as a business owner, rather than keeping up with the various obligations to state and local and federal authorities, and we hire folks to do that so we can focus on our business. So if you have that relationship, I encourage that you leverage that relationship. And then we've also created a grant calculator as well as a eligibility Q&A on our website to help folks really determine where they may land. Well, first, if they're eligible, and where they may land in the process with respect to the amount in advance, so that you know, and I'll show you that shortly. So before you get into the application. So going back to the idea about gathering your documents and what you will need in order to get through the process successfully, you will need your federal tax returns for your business for both 19 and 20. You will need a copy of the agreement that supports your rental, lease, or mortgage payments. And for the initial applications, just the copy of those agreements. It's not the actual evidence of payment that comes necessary when you make future requests. In order to evidence the decline, we provide essentially two, what I'll say are the somewhat simpler options, and then a third. But many folks, not all, and we recognize that, report their revenue to the Department of Taxation and Revenue in order to either report their gross receipts, taxes, or to report their revenue, but comply with that they don't actually have to, they're exempt from paying those taxes. And so those reports are handy to come up with the calculation. There's a little bit of a disconnect there because it's a quarterly decline, but by far and away the majority of businesses file monthly. So when you prepare for using your CRS reports to demonstrate the decline, it's important to note that you need a whole quarter's worth, or 2 quarters worth. You'll need the 2020 quarter, the comparable 2019 quarter. And so if you're a monthly filer, you're actually going to need 6 reports in order to demonstrate the decline using that report. In the event that you don't report to taxation and revenue, like a nonprofit, for example, or if you're one of the industries that is 100% exempt from that process, you can use copies of your 2019 and 2020 federal business tax returns. And then what we look for is just a demonstration and so some supporting evidence of, say, from your financial statements of what quarter you're comparing, that we can, draw a linkage to the tax returns. And then lastly, if for some reason the business has neither of those, there is a process by which we'll look purely just at financial statements connected to bank statements, invoicing patterns, and those types of things. We don't see a lot of that, but if folks do need to go that route, we have staff available to work closely with them to be able to understand that story and construct the revenue decline. Lynn or Maria, are there any questions?
Adam, I'll jump in here. This is Lynn, and there is one question about when you're evidencing your revenue decline, can you choose the quarters to evidence the decline?
Yes, yes, you can absolutely choose the quarters that provide for the greatest grant amount. So if,
Great.
for example, at the onset of the pandemic and say the December timeframe of, that got reported in 2020 is the worst of it, and some folks maybe started to already be coming out of it in spring, and that's those are the periods you can compare. Then absolutely compare the worst period that is available in the documents.
Thank you, Adam. There are a couple of comments from people who say they can't hear. And I know there are other comments, so it's not universal. I know other people are able to hear you, but Jennifer, is there do you have any ideas of what people may need to do so they can hear this presentation? I'll just pause you here for just a minute, Adam, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Yeah, Lynn, I saw those comments. They happened at the beginning, so I'm hoping that got resolved. I would just have to tell them to click. Yeah, I've seen some people can hear now, so I think that's been resolved, but we will make sure we send out a recording, and if anybody wants to respond and say needs assistance, to let me know. But yeah, you'll just have to check your audio on that. But I think it's been resolved.
Great, thank you. And then Adam, there are a few questions just clarifying that a business with no employees would not be eligible to apply, and questions about do contract employees count or do volunteers count? So if you want to just go over that again, that would be great.
Sure, I'll touch on that. So unfortunately, this particular program is not available to businesses that are no employees. Contract employees are also not eligible to demonstrate the decline because contract employees are paid generally on a 1099 basis and don't report to the Department of Workforce Solutions through the business. And in addition, a volunteer network of folks also would not qualify for the same reason that there's no wages being reported to the Department of Workforce Solutions. So in that, along those lines, talking about the other required documents, I'm going to focus in on the first 3 documents here. And this is quite honestly some of the trickier part of this program because we require evidence of reporting essentially state unemployment tax to the Department of Workforce Solutions. That's one of the roles that they serve for the state of New Mexico. The report is this wonderful bureaucratic name called the ES 903A. I wish I could take credit for giving it that name, but I can't. We mention this report often, but we also will take really any state unemployment report that is clearly demonstrates that it is for the reporting to the Department of Workforce Solutions. We commonly see the QuickBooks version of this, the Paychex, the ADP, other private payroll companies, their versions of this. They've all figured out how to report electronically to unemployment agencies all over the country, and they did not decide to adopt this wonderful name. So this is not the only type of report that we take for this, but you'll see it in our language often, and we've been making some changes to make sure that that's a little more clear that it's not just that. But what is important, because it is specifically in statute, is that it is for employees that are reported to DWS. Now, if I've got any bookkeepers or accountants or other folks that assist businesses with filing this report with the Department of Workforce Solutions, you may have already figured out that how are you going to get this full-time equivalent number, because that report does not require hours to be reported. So because of that, what we had to do was create a process and request essentially a payroll record that has the same employees on it, that has the hours that were paid for during that quarter. And so that's the reason for not only the report to the Department of Workforce Solutions, but also some kind of report from your accounting software or your payroll software that has the total number of hours paid in that quarter, so we can do the calculation of the FTE equivalency. And I know that that's complicated, and that's probably the biggest communication challenge that we've had with this program, but hopefully I've drawn the connection there. And then lastly, we do require the front and back of the driver's license of the authorized officer. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the files are all uploaded electronically inside of your account with New Mexico Finance. It's at salesforce.com. Lynn, were there any questions that came out of the very confusing document request?
You know, one question was whether nonprofits are eligible. And so if, I don't know if you want to touch a bit on that nonprofits would submit their Form 990 instead of the federal tax return.
Sure. So for me, yeah, thank you for that, Lynn. Yes, nonprofits, that's in fact right here. Are you a small business or nonprofit? Yes, you absolutely can apply for this program as a nonprofit. For me, the 990 represents the federal tax return version. I know that that's not universally true or considered true. But yes, so you would use your 990s or your 990Ns to demonstrate the revenue that the nonprofit had and the decline that it experienced. So what I want to do is go through our website and show you several resources and tools, and then we'll hop over to an application so you can see the inside of the portal and a little bit about how it works. So here we've got some am I eligible? We have apply now in several places. I'll point you to contact information that we have that you can reach out to us at the Finance Authority. We have a great team of folks that while folks have been a bit frustrated with how complex this application may feel with the information that's needed, we have a great team of people that will help you get through the process and answer your questions. So please utilize that resource. And if they don't treat you well, let me know and I'll make sure that Maria finds out about it. Just kidding, it's never happened. We get great feedback on the staff. So on the check eligibility portion here, this takes you through a series of questions, simple questions to confirm you're eligible. So does your business or nonprofit organization operate in New Mexico? If the answer is yes, it'll ask you whether or not you have at least one full-time or part-time employee, but fewer than 75. And if the answer is yes, it will take you to the next question, which simply asks whether or not you laid off employees or reduced their hours during the pandemic. If that's yes, there is a requirement in the law that the grantees be current on their state and local tax obligations. So we do have to confirm that during the process. So we ask the question and then we do a confirmation later using a third party to help us verify that information. And then lastly, did your business experience the revenue decline between comparable quarters from the 2019 to 2020? And if yes, it will take you here, again, remind folks of the different documentation that's required to get through the process, and then it will take you to our application. And before I go to the application, I just want to go back over the some of the other resources that help folks prepare for the process. In addition to the eligibility widget, we also have a calculator that can estimate what your business will be eligible for. It's just simply asks for the honest answer to questions. If you're dishonest in your answers, it will not give you an honest answer. And so if I select a 60 to 80% decline, you can see it starts to calculate, here's the $16,000 for the base. If I were to change that to higher, it goes up. If I were to change it to lower, it goes down. Then I select the average wage. If it's over 17, it adds the 2. And then if you estimate that you're going to pay 3 new FTEs, it'll go ahead and calculate for you the award. If it's 4 new FTEs, it'll calculate the award. And so while I'm on that topic, I'll share another message that's important, because we're a little further down into this process. And I want to make sure people understand that because this program has been open since June, you actually can demonstrate your rehire for folks that you've already rehired in the first 2 quarters of 2021. So you don't have to be hiring right now, or even if you are a business that actually already added back the equivalent of your pre-pandemic staffing levels, you also would be able to use the previous add back in your process of getting your reimbursements beyond the first one. The same is also true for if you're having very much a difficult time hiring now, which is happening all over the country. But you do plan to hire between now and this program, because of the way the law was written. If you are awarded, those funds will have your business's name on them all the way until March of 2023. So it may be very difficult to be staffing up now, but those funds will be in your award for you to demonstrate the add back all the way through the first quarter of 2023. So we have a ways to go, and we want to make sure that folks understand that, so that, a process like this that you're going to put your energy into and take away from your business activity, that you realize that being frustrated by the lack of labor supply now is not a reason, hopefully not a reason to deter you from coming in, because you can use that evidence from the past, the first 2 quarters of 2021, and also any quarters up through March 2023. Did I generate any comments there, Lynn?
Thanks, Adam. There is one question about FTEs. Somebody wants to know if their FTEs are from out of state. Does that count for this grant, or is it just New Mexico employees only?
So as long as they were, for some reason in that business relationship, reported to the state of New Mexico's unemployment agency, which is the Department of Workforce Solutions, then they would count. But if they're being, if the unemployment insurance for whatever overlay of jurisdictions is going to another state, then they would not count.
Thank you. And then just to clarify that the reduction in workforce, we have been saying that it's if a business has to lay off their employees or reduce their employer hours, does it also count if an employee leaves the business and there's the reduction in workforce, but it was on the employee's side rather than the business side?
That would essentially be eligible too. So there would be no reason to prevent the use of that type of reduction as well.
Thank you. Just a reduction in hours overall, or a reduction in employees, regardless of the reason.
Correct.
Thank you. And then a couple of other questions about if people received funding from previous rounds. So I think if people received a LEDA grant already, or if people received any of the other assistance grants from any other programs within the state or federal, state, or local programs, does that preclude them from applying for this?
It would only if you already were an awardee of the LEDA Recovery Grant, you cannot apply for a second one unless, let me pause there, unless your business has multiple locations. The program allows for grant awards per location. So if you have multiple locations, you can have an application and potentially an award for every location. And then if you received any other financial assistance from the federal CARES money, whether that be the money that the finance authority helped to deploy, or if it was from one of the municipalities who received portions of that to deploy to businesses, none of that would preclude you from applying for this program.
Great, thanks, Adam. There are more questions, but I think they'll be more appropriate after this demonstration.
Okay, great. So, oops, I think I went too fast. Let me go backwards. So, let me do one other thing. So if you land up on our home page, just to share, the way to get to the page with recovery is you could just type /recovery, but most people don't do that. You can come here to our small business recovery and stimulus programs and come here to the recovery grant. And that will land you on the picture of this very handsome chef preparing what I always consider to be maybe fajitas, I don't know. But it makes me hungry every time I see it. And then you come here to apply now. If you don't have an account, it does take you through these questions up until the time that you have an account. And if you go to start a new application, it will take you through the registration process where it requests this information. You set up your email, you utilize your email to also be your username. Some other agencies and other organizations use Salesforce, and you can't have the same email address twice in Salesforce. So if you run into that error, you simply need to give a valid email handle that looks like an email, but it will still let you create a different username. Just a little tip there. And then you give us a phone number and the business name, create a password, and it will create your account. Once you have your account, this is your new landing page where you have options to begin. We also run the Small Business Recovery Loan Fund. So in here are not only access to the grant application that we're discussing today, but also the Small Business Recovery Loan Fund, which we also have all the information on our website, as well as the same team of people standing by to take questions on if the loan is also an option for your business. And if we have time, I can try to touch on it a little bit because it's a very, very, very generous, low cost loan that can make a lot of sense for businesses. Anyhow, you will start a new grant application unless you're coming back to continue your grant application. In this case, I'm coming back to continue the application. You can see I've started my my foodie taco truck application, and I'm going to come back to it, and I'm going to walk through a little bit of the initial information that's required. We ask some basic information about the business, the address, all of that type of information. And we also use this portion of the portal to deploy some additional security features. As folks know, there's been a pretty significant amount of, I'll call them, not so nice folks making requests for these financial assistance. So we've got a significant amount of tools operating in the background to actually confirm the identity of the business, the identity of the individual, the relationship between the two, and then the authentication experience on the screen. So you'll see that when you fill out your own application. The next page is very simple. It asks for the type of business. Depending on the answers to these questions, they will change. It asks you for the number of employees at the date of application, which is really just for reporting purposes. We're trying to get a sense of the shape that folks were in when they started the process. So hopefully down the road, we can show a before and after picture. This is the first of where things tend to get a little bit tricky for folks. So I'm now in the eligibility section with respect to revenue decline. It asks me, it actually pre-populated my answer on this question from the previous form. And then it's asking me to select the quarter of comparison. So here you're just going to decide. You may need to do a little work on the side to understand which is the best quarter to apply for to get the greatest percentage decline. In this instance, I've chosen the second quarter. And then Adam's taco truck in 2019 in the second quarter did $25,000, and then in 2020 did 10. That's a revenue decline. It calculates for you here 60, and then the system simply asks you to select the range. This might look familiar to you by now. These are the different tiers, and based upon selecting the range that's accurately calculated here, the system will update with the first part of the grant amount. The next section, and I'll pause, Lynn, if there's something we should touch on before I go on to the full-time equivalency.
Thanks, Adam. I don't see any questions in the chat about that. Maria, if you see any, if you want to mention those to Adam, but I don't see any at this point.
Okay, lots of questions come with the FTE section, so that's probably where we'll focus on now. So this section is where you start to answer these questions. We ask for the highest number of employees for 1 month. When you see this report, what you'll see is the way that it's formatted, the report that you're giving to the Department of Workforce Solutions, and almost universally, regardless of what system generates it, it asks for the number of employees in a month, and we're simply picking that up here. There's really not, to be clear, while we're looking for the right answer, there's really not a wrong answer here, because again, the number of people is not actually relevant to the calculation. We're essentially looking to see that, what is on the report you're giving us matches, that we've got the right report. But just to be clear, if you make a mistake here, it's really not the end of the world. So don't pull your hair out over that one. Then it's going to ask for the month of the highest number of employees that we're looking at. Again, these two boxes are tied together. There's really not a wrong answer here, but we're just looking to see that we're getting the correct report. And this is where the math takes place. So from your payroll records, we want to know, we have to know, what was that, what we like to refer to as that sort of high water mark. How many hours were folks working prior to the pandemic? And that number is going to come from your payroll report, and you're going to enter it here. And so in this case, what I've essentially done is I've put in the equivalent of 8 people at 30 hours. But there's no need to really worry about the numbers here. You just need to get this number directly off of a quarterly payroll report and put that in here. And then the system calculates what that is. That's exactly 5.54 FTEs. Then it asks you to do the same thing again, but for one of the quarters, your lowest number, again, we're looking to help optimize the amount of the award. So your lowest number and the hours in the same quarter, which should correspond. So here, what I've essentially in my example demonstrated is a decline of 2.77 employees. And these numbers are rounding, and they sort of get a little silly. And I think that's where some folks get hung up. But the most important thing is to see that, okay, this is the maximum, this is the lowest, this is the amount between the highest watermark and the lowest watermark. And so here, as long as I don't put in a number higher than that, and I'm just, for my example, going to say, okay, if awarded, I plan to hire the equivalent of 2.5 employees, then I can proceed to the next page to give me a list of those folks. Any questions there?
Actually, Adam, there was one question about if they're using a decrease in hours to qualify, then do they still need to be hiring people back? So if you want to just kind of go over that a bit, that might help.
Sure. So not in the application process, but the intention is for, at the time of award, the business will receive 25% of the award. The application process essentially requests that you demonstrate that you plan to add back employees. If you don't plan to add back employees, I guess the long and short of it is you may be awarded, but you're not going to get the full amount of the award. And it's possible your application may not be approved if you don't have any intention of hiring back. And that's the connection to the Local Economic Development Act, where the award has to be tied to hiring staff. I hope that answered it. Lynn, do you think I got that right? To the nature
Yeah,
of the question?
Yes, thanks. I think that's pretty clear that it's a two-pronged thing. You have to have had that reduction in either staff or staff hours, and then now you have to be building back your workforce.
So, Maria, you might have to help me here because I would think I should be seeing my list.
So yeah, exactly that.
Okay,
And then you'll be able to see where you added. There you go.
thank you.
Sure.
So prior to our discussion, I came in and I added in the equivalent of, or I'm sorry, not the equivalent. I added in this is essentially my plan, my rehiring plan for my food truck. I intend to try to get back up to the 8 folks that I had as I get back to, full hours. And so I'm adding a prep cook, a line cook, a manager, and a cashier. I've entered the hours and I've entered the anticipated, and the system will calculate for you. You don't have to calculate the full-time equivalency. And you can see that what it's done up here is it's calculated the average hourly wage is above $13, but less than 17. And it's added these numbers together at 2.5. And so since this number is the same as the number that was provided on the previous screen, the system will allow you to proceed. I'm working on there's some small glitches in here for folks that aren't making those numbers tie exact, and I will get those worked out so you don't experience a unnecessary error very quickly. But this application is clean because this number matches the number provided in the previous screen. And so now in the award here, you can see that it's got the average wage component is 1,000 because it was over $13, and the grant component per FTE is 17 because of my decline. And so that's all calculated on behalf of the applicant in the system. And that's to the extent I was going to show the application. There's some additional questions after that for reporting purposes, and then the required documents section where it will ask you to upload your documents and then make some statements about your intention to be a going concern, that you don't, there's no evidence, you have no reason to believe that you'll be filing for bankruptcy, those types of questions at the end, and that you are who you say you are. While we get some more questions generated, I did forget to share one other thing that can be useful, which is if you scroll down further, we have more tools. We have more resources about the documents that are required. We also, in the event that you don't actually use a payroll system, we have a supplemental report that you can use. I thought that was right here. We'll have to find that. Maybe it's down here. There's a whole bunch of information about frequently asked questions that can help you through the process. Our team of staff are also available to walk you through, using these resources live on a phone call to get the answers to the questions that you might need. And then I believe we've got a nice section of how-to videos. So you can come right in here, you can click on this before you start the application, or if you're in the application and something is not working for you, you can come back here, click on one of these, and it'll show you, it has a demonstration, a recorded demonstration of what the system is asking you to do. And I think I've come to the end. I've mentioned all of this. This is a very important place to go. This is where you get everything that you need. Once you have your account, you can come back in and get the status of your application. It will provide back to you where it is in the process, right in the portal. And we have a deadline of December 7th to get as many applications as possible and to get folks awarded during the month of December. Is there any other points, Lynn or Maria, that we want to make sure folks hear today?
Thanks, Adam. There are a couple of things to touch on. There was one question from somebody in the food industry who wanted to know if the average wage includes tips.
So having spent a lot of time in that industry, it can include tips. It really depends on whether or not you are reporting that, so that we can just verify that these wages are being reported. So as long as there's not going to be a compliance issue, then no problem. And I know a lot of restaurants in the industry had gone that route because the federal government created a bunch of incentives for restaurants to report all of those wages. So as long as we can tie out that they were actually reported, then no problem.
One thing that I would add, Adam, if I may, is I want to stress that just because the deadline is December 7th, we do still have plenty of funds. So we do encourage all small business owners to apply, obviously based on eligibility, so that we can, get you funded and get the money out the door. But we do still have plenty of funds. So I wanted to add that in there. We do encourage you to submit the application as soon as possible so that we have plenty of time to review and even send it back to you for corrections if needed, because we do have the ability to do so, and make sure that we get you funded and get your business the help that it needs.
Thank you, Maria. Excellent point.
There's one other question about the timeline for the prospective employees. So when people put together their prospective employee plan, if you want to talk some about like what time period that encompasses, and does it include employees that have already been hired, and what happens if they don't meet their hiring goals for whatever reason?
So the total timeline for what can be included is from what was reported in April of 2021 all the way through what will be reported in essentially April, but for the end of March 2023. So it could be that while your application is going to get likely awarded or not awarded based on all of the eligibility other standards, when you come in to get your additional reimbursements, so what I said earlier was you'll get 25% at the time of the award, and then you come back and say, okay, here's my demonstration that I added back, here's my payroll report, here's my DWS report, here are my receipts for paying my lease. And then we're going to look at that and we do a calculation to give you either another 25% or the equivalent of your lease payments or the equivalent of what you added back times your award. And so you can use those previously hired folks and their associated hours to get your second and third reimbursements, which you actually, if awarded now, you could come in. We're just about to unleash the reimbursement tool. You could actually come in right after you're awarded and fill out those and get 2 quarters worth of additional funding, because that's already technically available to you if you're an awardee. Going back to some of the original point, so that's really what the prospective employee list is. That the reality is that that's a list that shows like a commitment and a plan that the business owner is thinking about what it plans to do to reconfigure in this new economy. We're not really holding you to that list. The only thing that you're being held to is the FTE equivalency. So if you come back and say, well, I didn't hire 3 cooks, I hired 2 cooks and a cashier, the program knows no difference. The only thing the program knows is that you committed to a certain level of FTE add backs, and that's what it's looking to see that was demonstrated. And again,
Thanks,
all the
Adam.
way to March 2023.
Great, thank you, Adam. And just to reiterate one of the things that Adam just said, I know several of you on here have gotten the grant and you've gotten your first installment and you're waiting to find out how to submit the next requisition. And that information will be coming soon. And as soon as it's available, we'll send out information to all of you. So just stay tuned on that.
Yep. We are in the very, very final stages of testing it in as many scenarios that could potentially occur, which I'm sure we'll have missed one or two or so, but once it's deployed, but you never know. But we're very, very close. I do anticipate deploying that likely by Monday or Tuesday, and we'll be sending out e-blasts with videos and links as to how it's done and get you those rolling.
Thanks, Adam. There are a couple of questions about whether new or startup businesses can apply.
Well, for whatever reason, fortunate or unfortunate, the answer is no, because you would have had to have employees pre-pandemic and post-pandemic to demonstrate both the FTE decline, and then you will also have to have demonstrated the revenue decline. So if it's a new business as of now, it would not qualify.
Great, thank you. There's a question from a nonprofit organization who wants to know if the decline in revenue can come from donations and grants, or does it have to be a decline from earned revenue, earned income?
I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's any kind. We may need to take a look specifically at that application, but I would suggest that there's nothing that would prohibit that kind of revenue would also not be includable in the decline. I mean, the reality is that's probably the biggest amount of a significant amount of revenue that nonprofits experience, because folks were no longer in a position to give the donations that they once gave to the nonprofits. But let's take a specific look at your instance and confirm.
Thanks, Adam. Several people are asking about home-based businesses. Can the grant be used to pay either rent on an apartment or to pay a home mortgage?
So they would have to be, so firstly, recall, and it can happen, it's a little rare, but it can happen that home-based businesses have employees. So many home-based businesses don't have employees, but in the event that you first meet that qualification, we would need to see some documentation around the use of the home for business and confirm that it's a legitimate business expense, that in fact the business is paying it, and there is an underlying mortgage, which leads me to also share with folks another thing we've seen is we've seen related businesses where there's two businesses owned by the same authorized officers, and one of them is paying a lease to the other one. That kind of lease or rent payment is only eligible if there is in fact also an underlying mortgage on the property. So just a pass through between two businesses paying a lease is not going to be a qualifiable lease expense.
Thanks, Adam. The next question may be more for Maria. One of the businesses has had trouble printing the DWS reports. And so is there any help in how they can submit their DWS ES 903A report?
Absolutely, thank you, Lynn. So in the case that you cannot provide the actual report, we accommodate to screen prints or snippets of the actual portal where you can view that information. So we're definitely understanding that not everybody has the ability to either print or even has a printer or can PDF it. So a screenshot of that information is acceptable as well. If you're still having issues, I recommend that you give us a call and we can walk you through the process or get you some additional help as well.
Thank you, Maria. This question has to do with the quarterly reimbursements, and the question is, how long do the quarterly reimbursements run? The funding formula based on employees brings a possible amount much higher than monthly rent.
Right, so great question. The way that the formula works is it can't ever exceed the full amount of the award. So to that same point, you actually could be showing you're going to add back much more FTEs than the cap will allow. So if your grant is capped at 100,000, the funding formula is always going to calculate the lesser of the mortgage, the FTEs times the award, or 25% of the total award. So the actual value of the mortgage, lease, and rent in excess is going to be capped out at the 25% of the award.
Thank you, Adam. This is a good question coming up. Does the month with the highest or lowest number of FTEs need to be within the quarter that you are using for the decreased revenue evidence?
Can you repeat that one more time?
You bet. So does the month that you're using for the highest or lowest number of FTEs need to be within the same quarter that you're using to evidence your decreased revenue decline?
So the answer to that is that the whole formula is based upon the number of hours in the quarter. So the number that you give us on the of employees on that report is rather irrelevant. So we're asking for that number simply as a connection to what report you're giving us. So it shows 3 different months with 3 different numbers of employees. That's really all that that's asking for. If you gave us the lowest number in another month, we're simply going to be honestly confused as to why you gave us that number, but the report doesn't say it. So I encourage you to just give us the same quarterly report that you're giving us the quarterly payroll hours, and that will eliminate that confusion.
And then Adam, just to clarify on that, the place where you evidence the decrease in revenue, where you choose your quarter, is what you want to use is the quarter that has the greatest decline in revenue, which may or may not be the one that has the lowest or highest FTE, correct?
Correct. That's correct.
So,
they're not connected.
So you would be able to use different quarters. Okay, thank you.
That's correct. That it was designed to give people the greatest award amount. So use the greatest number of FTE change from the high water mark to the lowest, and use the greatest revenue decline. And those quarters do not have to be the same quarters from year over year. In trying to be flexible, we also made it a little confusing.
Right. One other question that came in talks about salaried employees, and if the salaried employee, kind of how you would calculate salary employees and how that fits into the FTE calculation.
Maria, maybe you could take that one. I don't know how much we've seen. I know that we are able to convert to the FTE equivalency of that. I think we look to the specifics of the situation and some documentation around the number of hours that the salaried employees work, and that works as well. That's accurate, Maria?
That's exactly correct. So the application, we would know how many, well, the business owner will certify how many hours that salaried employee is actually working and what the yearly salary equates to in an hourly wage. So it's the same idea, just translated into an hourly wage, and then certifying how many hours that person worked.
Great, thank you. A couple questions about what the funds can be used for, and are those the only things that the funds can be used for?
That's correct. You can only receive reimbursement with evidence of your rent, lease, or mortgage payments. However, once you receive the funds, we're not making any additional reporting requirement as to how they're spent. So because it's reimbursement basis, you evidence that you had that expense, you get your funds. So you very much could look at it as subsidizing your other expenses.
Lynn, I just want to say we're at the hour mark. I'm fine with staying a little longer and asking more questions if there's some good ones. I just want to let everybody know that I'm capturing all the questions there's quite a few that we're probably not going to get to today. I'll make sure that Adam and Maria and Lynn get access to that. So it's totally up to you, Adam, Maria, Lynn, if you want to stay on and field more questions, that's fine with me.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'm happy to field some more, Lynn, if you think there are some good ones. Make sure that we get as much information to folks as possible. And then beyond that, we can also look at the list and send out some responses.
Great, thanks, Adam. There was a question about if you have prospects to hire FTEs, but they quit and you can't find employees to hire right now.
Yeah, so that's that challenge that's going on all over the nation and even in other parts of the world. And that's where I want to really hit home on the point that once you have this award in place, you can come all the way through March of 2023 to demonstrate the FTEs that you've hired. So if you're having those challenges now, know that your demonstration of adding staff, you've got, nearly 15 months to go, 16 months to go that you can use to demonstrate that going forward.
Thanks, Adam. And then there are a couple of questions about the timeline of the application approval process.
So generally, so we'll hit the application deadline of December 7th. I anticipate that we'll likely be able to get through all of the approval process and the prioritization if it's needed during the month of December. Our team's pretty seasoned in this process now. Once we have a complete application, it's really a pretty quick approval, just probably a number of days. What's a little unknown right now is what the total volume is going to look like and how long it'll take to review all of them and prioritize them and send out the awards. But I would anticipate you having a good sense of that probably within, no more than 10 days of December 7th.
Thanks, Adam. Somebody else wants to know are we tracking businesses to see if they stay open?
So the answer to that question is yes. We're required by the law to keep track of the recipients going forward. And so we use a third-party partner to provide the unique ID of the business to them, and then they run processes that are looking for public filings for bankruptcies and send that information back to us on regular intervals so that we can comply with the law as required by the state.
Great, thank you. There's one question about whether a nonprofit 501c7 is eligible to apply. I don't know exactly what a C7 is right now, but I can look and see, or Maria, you may know off the top of your head.
Yeah, so the way that the rules are written is it doesn't specify which type of nonprofits are or are not eligible. It just says nonprofits are eligible. So and as opposed to our loan side, only specific types of nonprofits can qualify. On the grant side is any nonprofit can qualify.
Thank you, Maria. There's another question. Is a nonprofit with 1099 employees eligible? So contract employees.
Neither nonprofits or businesses with contract employees are eligible because they're not reported to the Department of Workforce Solutions.
Thank you. Jennifer, I'm not seeing that many other questions. I'm having a little hard time seeing the questions on my screen. I don't know if you can see them better and if you notice any that have not been answered at this point. Actually, let me just jump in. A few people have asked if there are any other programs to help sole proprietors or to help businesses that don't have employees. And what I would say is definitely reach out to Jennifer and the folks at the Economic Development Department, because they're a great resource for kind of everything that's out there in terms of loans and grants.
Right, absolutely. Yes, you can always contact me, and everybody that's registered will get you'll get to receive an email from me, so you can just respond to my email with the recording. I've just kind of been going through it, Lynn, and there's a lot of specific questions, so I'm not sure which ones you want to address now or offline, up to whatever you guys would like to do. But again, I'll send you the full list to the group after this meeting.
That would be great. And if, just so everybody who's still on the call, when I get the list from Jennifer, we can send you responses to your questions just to make sure you get them answered. And I would say also, please feel free to reach out the page that Adam has up right now with the recovery@nmfa.net email address and the phone number 992-9696. Both of those have a lot of people who are standing by to help businesses get through the program or just answer questions. There's help available in English and Spanish. So please do feel free to reach out. And I apologize if I didn't get your question in the chat, get to that, but please reach out otherwise. I'll turn it back to you, Adam.
Yeah, I think I really appreciate everybody's time today. I know it's a lot of information, and this is just the first step in coming to the program. We very much encourage you to take the time to do so. Again, we have real people on the other side of the phone that are answering calls to help you with this. So it's not just, we're not hiding behind technology here. And so please do come register in the portal, start an application, and let us help you get through the process.
Yes, I just want to thank you all. Lynn, thank you so much for helping me with these questions. I don't know if I would have done such a good job as you did, but Adam, Maria, thank you so much for your time, and we'll be in touch. And yes, feel free, whoever's left on the line, feel free to contact me and with any other questions as well. So with that, I'll go ahead and end the webinar, and it was nice meeting everybody, and hopefully you learned some good information.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.